Hi, everybody. It's Professor Malat. Welcome to week 5. As we begin drafting the literacy narrative, that is essay number 1, that's due at the end of this week, I want to take a little bit of time to talk to you about this concept of angle of vision. So, take a moment and think for your literacy narrative, ask yourself this question: how do I want to be seen? How do I want to be seen? So there's this thing called rhetorical strategy. When we use language, we use it in a certain way to have a desired effect on a particular audience. As the writer, you are in control of that narrative. Um, so I want you to think about what strategies that you will use to help persuade your audience. You want them to feel a certain way. You want them to think a certain way. Use these rhetorical strategies to help you control your literacy narrative. So the angle of vision here, and there you can see the image of a man on an island, and in the distance, there's a person in a boat, and he's like, "Boat! Yay! Finally, somebody has come to save me." Right? Whereas in the next frame, you see the man in the boat. That's the focus there, right? And he's like, yes, land, finally. I've been out to sea for so long. So it's really a matter of perspective. So if you think of the angle of vision as the way in which the author chooses to present the narrative or chooses to present themselves, it's the perspective or point of view that they present in the story. Um, and this is how you begin to make the literacy narrative your own. You can control the way that you want to present the story. And there are many factors that are involved in this. There are details, either selected or omitted, things that you might choose to leave out. Word connotation, whether they're positive, negative, or mixed. Your sentence structure, how you can emphasize or de-emphasize a point, and how you organize your writing. All of those things can help to factor into the angle of vision, factor into the way that you present your narrative. And lastly, tone and style, the way that you use language. Um, is it going to be negative? Is it going to be positive? That kind of a thing. And your style, maybe you have a humorous style, maybe you're serious about it. It really depends on how you want to affect the audience and how you wish to present yourself. So this is your lens, right? The audience will view the story in a certain way based on those certain rhetorical choices that you make, that rhetorical strategies that you make, and what you see as important. Um, Remember, it's a good idea not to dwell on things that are not important to your story. That tends to confuse your reader. If it's not important or appropriate to the story, then you probably don't want to spend paragraphs describing it. Think of a party. So I like to think of, if you tell a story of a party to your grandmother and then you tell the same story to your best friend, how would you present yourself to your grandma versus your best friend, right? So you think about the image that you want to portray. Do you want to portray yourself as the goody two shoes soda sipper, or do you want to be the wild party animal, right? Depending on who your audience is, will also factor into how you present yourself, right? Think about what details you would include or omit. Would you tell that the party was so crazy that the police were called? Maybe, if you're talking to your best friend. But if you're talking to your grandma, maybe you'll just say, well, things got kind of out of control and I had to call the police, right? Um, and what sort of language would you use? Would you use slang with your grandma? Maybe, maybe not. You probably would use slang with your best friend. Um, and emphasis of the party. Are you going to go into great detail, Or are you just going to give kind of a vanilla description of the type of fun that you had? These are all things that factor into how you want to present yourself, right? And what things you're going to include, what kind of things you're going to leave out, what sort of language you're going to use, and that kind of thing. So that brings us to the idea of purpose, audience, and genre, right? So after we build off this angle of vision, you want to think about purpose. What are you trying to accomplish in the paper? What do you want your readers to know or believe or do? And so you have to think about your rhetorical aim or the strategy that you're going to use. Do you want to express something? Do you want to explore something? Do you need to inform someone, analyze something, synthesize something, persuade, or reflect? It might be a combination of some of those, or it may be only one or two, right? It's probably not going to be all of those because that would be a lot, right? Um, think about the motivating occasions or factors, right? What are those things that you want your readers to know? Are you motivated by some internal thing or is it more external, right? Internal would be like you want your audience to know how literacy made some kind of an impact on your life. You know, it might be a moment or it might be a list of chronological things that you've experienced through your educational journey, or it could be external, right? You have a paper that you have to write, you have this deadline looming, and there are certain parameters that have to be met, right? Um, so there's a delicate balance between the internal and the external, what motivates you to write this literacy narrative. Um, but again, think about your purpose there, right? What is the purpose? What effect do you want to have on your readers? Um, Also, that brings us to the audience, right? Think about who your audience is, what their expectations are, what their values are, right? And this goes back to the idea of the grandma versus the best friend. Different audience members from different groups are going to have different expectations and different values. Think about the things that they already know or believe about your literacy narrative. Um, are there things that they need to know? Do you need to introduce important background information? For example, if you're in an online class and we haven't met face to face and I don't really know a whole lot about you, do I know that you grew up in a different country and that English isn't your first language? Maybe, maybe not. So that might be important information that your audience needs to know, right? And also think about more than just me being your audience. Think about your classmates or even the greater community at the University of Cincinnati, right? Um, think about your fellow students and how much they know about literacy, right? How much they know about you as an individual. You also want to think about how much that audience cares. Are they a captive audience? You know, somebody who has to read it? Well, yes, I am a captive audience. I need to read your literacy narratives in order to learn more about you and be familiar with your story. But perhaps someone who isn't as invested in that story might need to be hooked in. You might need to interest them right off the bat, right? So audience is also intimately connected with the genre itself, right? You have to think about what kind of document you're writing. What are its requirements for structure, style, document design, and that kind of thing. So this is really important to know and understand what the assignment is. We know that there are certain requirements for the structure and style because you're writing a literacy narrative. The genre gives your audience clues to what they're reading, but it also helps you to decide what to include. So knowing that it's a narrative, knowing that it's a personal narrative, that it's a personal narrative focusing on literacy kind of reins in what your genre is going to be, right? It's a very specific type of genre and it's going to look a certain way. It's going to be written a certain way. It will be different than, say, a research paper, right? You know that this is a personal narrative, it's talking about literacy, so you don't have to necessarily pull in research or provide sources for outside information because it is primarily based on your own personal experiences. Knowing these things will get you a long way through this assignment. So hopefully you understand a little bit more about the angle of vision and think about how you want to present yourself in this literacy narrative. What things you want to include, what things are better off left unsaid. If you have any questions, please reach out to me and ask. Also, please know that there are tutors available for both online and in-person students through the Learning Commons or the Academic Writing Center, depending on which campus you are associated with. Learning Commons can be, you can meet with tutors face to face as well as arrange some kind of virtual assessment so that you can get some help with your writing if you need to. Do not wait until the last minute because that is just going to harm you in the long run, especially if you run into problems and you realize that you need more help than you thought you initially needed. Um, so I'm here. The people at the Learning Commons and the Academic Writing Center are there to help you. Take care and good luck. I look forward to reading your essays.